Ever since I was a kid, had the TV on loud, watching legends make history. Hear the whole crowd, from the lights to the pyro, from the cheers to the paint. Every Monday and Friday got me hooked to the game. I watched John Cena rise and never back down. Saw Batista shake the world and tear it down. Brock Lesnar brought the beast and changed the fight, making every championship feel larger than life. From the first bell ringing to the final goodbye, wrestling gave me dreams that will never die. Whoa, we're born for the ring, living every moment, hearing thousands sing. From the heroes to the villains, every story we believe. WWE forever, that's the fire in me. Whoa, let the whole world know we're the fans in the crowd, and we're stealing the show. Every match, every memory, every victory scene, we're forever chasing wrestling dreams. I saw The Undertaker walk through the smoke. Every WrestleMania moment had the world in awe. Randy Orton striking out of nowhere again, while Triple H ruled the game with a sledgehammer ram. Shawn Michaels, Edge, and Rey Mysterio flying through the air like nobody else could go. Roman Reigns standing tall at the head of the line, while Seth Rollins steals the spotlight every time. Through every generation and every new face, the passion keeps growing, nobody can replace. Whoa, we're born for the ring, living every moment, hearing thousands sing. From the heroes to the villains, every story we believe. WWE forever, that's the fire in me. Whoa, let the whole world know we're the fans in the crowd, and we're stealing the show. Every match, every memory, every victory scene, we're forever chasing wrestling dreams. From Stone Cold Steve Austin to The Rock, the clock keeps ticking, but the memories don't stop. CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, and the future ahead. Every superstar leaves a legacy that's never dead. The arena lights shine, the crowd comes alive. 1, 2, 3, and the whole world vibes. No matter where we're from, we're united as one, for the love of wrestling till the final bell is done. Whoa, we're born for the ring, living every moment, hearing thousands sing. From Brock to Batista, Cena leading the way. The legends of WWE inspire us every day. Whoa, let the whole world know we're the fans in the crowd, and we're stealing the show. Every match, every memory, every victory scene, will forever be living the wrestling dream. Raise your hands high, let the whole crowd scream, because being a wrestling fan is more than a dream. From the past to the future, we'll always believe WWE's forever, and the memories we achieved.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are born for the ring here for wrestling favorites, and there's a lot of things we're going to bring on to this talk show as far as wrestling favorites. Now, talking about wrestling favorites here, The Rock, Stone Cold, Bret the Hitman Hart, Jimmy Snuka. Then you had the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. There's a lot of legends that have paved the way for newer guys in WWE that I think should all deserve their flowers. Even, the higher, which I call the higher ups, the champions. It's, won the big title belts, even the mid carders, even the guys that really wasn't big in the business. They still deserve their flowers because they paved their way through different stuff that they did for the business. To me, I personally think that if we're going to do this in the terminology of professional wrestling. There's two things that you have to look at when you're a wrestling fan. You know, the two sides of every wrestler's story, whether it's a heel or a babyface. And there's some, you know, things that I've noticed, you know, just by studying matches and looking real deeply into the craft, that stories are told. Not only stories are told, but also it's about the movement and taking care of one another in the ring. But also, we're going to bring some of your wrestling favorite memories. So if you guys got anything in the chat that you want to bring up, maybe even in the comment section that you want to bring up on this podcast for the wrestling favorites, more prepared to do so, because we've got a lot to talk about. I'm thinking DJ stepped out because he had to do a lot of stuff that's going to be that, but stay tuned for that, because we're about ready to hit that bell for notifications, because we're going to excel the limits here as we get ready to tell the different types of things for the wrestling fans that they need to study on for what we love as a passion is professional wrestling. So we're going to do something new today, guys. We're going to hit in the topic, and we're going to take you guys back. And what I mean by back, we're going to take you guys back in time in professional wrestling when they called it the golden era. And, you know, this is one of my favorite eras. Truthfully, you know, one of my favorite, I would personally say one of my favorite eras growing up as a kid, watching the business. There's a lot of things that, you know, the golden era brought. And not only the golden era, but, you know, we're going to get a more detailed subjects here as we are getting ready to do this talk show. And I'm going to get my phone set up so we can see everything from the picture here. So I hope everyone is, you know, enjoying what I'm about to bring to the table for wrestling favorites here, because this is going to be a huge shout out topic, not only to the fans that love the product, but, you know, to people that's, you know, and I really think that this is going to be some history lessons. Some history lessons. And before I get on with that topic, I'm going to invite DJ Chaotic to the stage of Wrestling Favorites podcast.
What up, everybody?
And we're going to cover some interesting matches, interesting errors. I feel like that, you know, starting off with the error, you know, you can't get an error with the first chapter that this is what we call the territory days. This is including NWA, TNA, ECW, WCW, WWE, and also AEW. Chapter 1, we're going to cover everything here. So we're going to cover The legends of the territory era: Louis Fess, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk, Jerry Lawler, and Ric Flair. Must-watch matches of those days: Flair versus Race, Starrcade 1983, Flair versus Dusty Rhodes series, and Terry Funk versus Jerry Lawler feuds. Those matches is what made the territory days back in the day. And DJ, if you want to add a little bit to this, or if you have a little bit of history knowledge about these territory days, you can add in on this.
Like, I feel like the best moments from those days, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head here. I mean, but adding into that, going into WCW and WWE, I mean, the whole Hogan versus Andre the Giant, Hogan versus Warrior. I mean, there's a lot that I could pick and choose from, but it's that certain moments just hit differently. But in this instance, I mean, there are a lot of wrestling favorites. I could say, even I could pick and choose from the many women's matches that were legendary. I mean, but where do we begin, CJ? Where do we begin? You there? Hello? He stepped away. But in certain moments of wrestling, you can't forget the classics, ladies and gentlemen. You can't forget the classics, because these classics are staples of wrestling history. And with wrestling history, there's so much that we can cover in a short time span, but
I mean, to be honest, Flair versus Harley Race at Starrcade 1983 was, before WWE became a global house power, wrestling back in those days was controlled by National Wrestling Alliance. And if you take a look at Ric Flair, he's actually held the NWA World Heavyweight title, the same title that I will cherish and love forever because of the title history.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Harley Race, another name that has held that title. Tommy Rich, the list goes on and on and on. And to be honest, this territory days was when wrestling was it was a real hot commodity. And what I mean by a hot commodity is it was like something that was getting big. Everybody wanted to watch wrestling because of these guys and what they do. Flair, one of the greatest to ever lace up a pair of boots.
15-time World Heavyweight Champion.
Pretty much. We're gonna go to the Chapter 2 days, and this is my very favorite. And I know DJ's got a lot of stuff he wants to say for Chapter 2 here. The WWF Golden Era, 1984 to 1992. Got the biggest stars back in those years: Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, Roddy Piper. Essential matches that was in that year. Those years.
DiBiase to be exact.
Yes. So the Matches that was in that year, 1984 to 1992. Andre versus Hogan, WrestleMania 3. Savage versus Steamboat, WrestleMania 3. Hogan versus Warrior, I think it's WrestleMania 6.
Yep, that was 6.
And then WrestleMania 7, Savage versus Warrior. That was the biggest matches in the Golden Era. I think that most people miss when they look at the Golden Era because they
now, there is one that is kind of like so low key underrated, but it's kind of like a staple. The whole Rick Martel versus Tito Santana or Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was kind of like one of those rare, opportune matches that stood out in that era as well.
Now we're going to get to chapter 3 here. And before we move on to the WCW here on chapter 3, my favorite era of the Golden Era. This is actually one of my favorites. It would have to be, WrestleMania 3, Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. One of my favorite matches, personally for me as a WWF fan before they changed it to WWE, one of my personal favorites.
Facts.
Don't know about DJ's, but I'll let DJ give you his favorite Golden Era or Territory days. Mike Sure's DJ.
Like, as far as Golden Era goes, it's 2 matches in particular that stands out like a sore thumb. One, you mentioned it, Hogan versus Andre the Giant. The second one in that era, I think, has to go to the Savage and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat match.
Now, there's a lot of things that I would say in the Golden Era that really stood out, but the Savage and the Ricky Steamboat was one of those that personally, everybody's got their own opinion, of course, DJ. But personally, mine, that was my wrestling favorites far as that era goes.
I mean, and I could throw this one in particular. I don't think nobody really understood this match before the Hogan Andre the Giant match. Was the Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy match. That match right there, held in a steel cage, mind you, was the most legendary match I could have ever seen for the Hogan Andre the Giant match.
Now we get on to chapter 3 of this wrestling favorites, and this is one of my favorites as well. We're going back to WCW when it rose to power, when they beat Monday Night Raw for 83 straight weeks during the Monday Night Wars. And the legends at that time, these is 6 legends that I'm going to name right off the bat that probably will be some of your favorites. Ric Flair, Sting, Lex Luger, Diamond Dallas Page, Booker T, and Vader. Now, the must-watch WCW matches they got listed here is Sting versus Flair, Clash of Champions, Flair versus Steamboat, Wrestle Roar 1989. Then you had Flair versus Steamboat, Chi-Town Rumble 1989. You had Flair versus Funk, Great American Bash 1989. Then you had War Games 1992.
All legendary moments.
All legendary moments of WCW.
But I will add one legendary moment to that. I don't think you probably remember this one, or do remember it. But I'll also give an honorary mention to the classic Starrcade match between Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero.
I have to give that one too. but my favorite WCW match of that era of, you know, when WCW rose to power in 1988 to 1996 would definitely have to be Sting versus Flair Clash of Champions.
I agree.
Hands down with that one, because, you know, Sting at the time, he was young. He was, you know, the old Sting that we saw in AEW. He had, you know, he was more athletic then, because when you get up in age, guys, it takes a toll on the human body. You can't do what you do when you're younger. So, you know, the Sting versus Flair would probably be one of my favorites of Clash of Champions, hands down.
Even though the rivalry between Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes at that time was a standout too.
I definitely agree with that. And what was your favorite WCW Rise to Power moment in this year of 1988 to 1996?
I gotta give it to the one and only Sid Vicious, because Sid was running through a lot of people around that time when he joined WCW, and he gets a very honorable mention because that man paved a lot in his career. And it wouldn't be right if we didn't mention Psycho Sid.
Yep, I definitely agree with that 100%. Psycho Sid, you know, they mentioned a lot of greats here. Besides, you know, Psycho Sid, you know, was one of the greats too. But, you know, Sting, Lex Luger, Diamond Dallas Page, Booker T, and Ric Flair and Vader. They was what made WCW, you know, and taken out of those, I would say out of those stars, Ric Flair and I'm going to say Booker T was two of the WWE superstars that once WCW shut down, they was the ones that was actively wrestling for the company, because Diamond Dallas Page, he was, you know, then and there, but he wasn't on television as much. Same as, you know, Lex Luger, same as Sting. I think Sting at the time went to TNA Wrestling. There's some favor moments in that in general. Yep. You have Ric Flair that, you know, stayed in WWE, had awesome moments, by the way, when he, you know, I don't know if DJ remembers this, but back in 2004, I can remember as a kid, you know, growing up watching wrestling on TV, you had one of the greatest quad wrestling factions known as Evolution. You had Batista, Randy Orton, Triple H, and Ric Flair. One of the all-time greats.
Here's one thing that I will say before we move to that next particular spot, CJ. I cannot forget the legendary moments that the Four Horsemen gave us in WCW.
I definitely agree with that. Four Horsemen is definitely a WCW. I definitely agree with that 100%.
Because it's like the Four Horsemen in itself was the catalyst, was one of the many catalysts that built WCW outside of the Cruiserweight division. I mean, we are missing a couple of good legends out of that group, like Steve Mongo McMichael and everybody who was associated with that group. Even Chris Benoit was associated with him. But that group is so legendary in its own right before the NWO came and did what they did. It's like Four Horsemen paved the way for WCW. That made people watch WCW. That's what kind of drew me into WCW, was the Four Horsemen.
I definitely agree with that statement. And when we get back to when we get to chapter 4, this is exactly personally, my favorite moments, it's called the NWO Era. The most important storyline in WCW history at Bash in the Beach, 1996. Hulk Hogan shocked the wrestling fans and formed the New World Order, NWO, with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Essential NWO matches: Hogan versus Sting, Goldberg versus which Hogan and Sting was at Starrcade 1997. You got Goldberg versus Hogan, Nitro 1998. Then you had DDP versus Savage, Spring Stampede 1997, War Games 1996, and War Games 1998. And must see WCW superstars that was in the NWO era. And also, not even in the NWO. They got some good ones here that I'm going to mention. Sting, Goldberg, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Booker T, DDP, Bret Hart, Chris Jericho, a little bit of the bubbly, Rey Mysterio, and Eddie Guerrero.
It's like the NWO, I mean, if nobody hasn't really seen what they've built in that time, I mean, they were the biggest powerhouse faction in WCW. They held so many iconic memories and stars that was associated with the NWO. It's crazy.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. And
who could forget the moment that Kevin Nash threw Rey Mysterio like a lawn dart into the truck?
It's human darts. Get ready. Little creature. In the words of New Jack, bombs away. Whee!
That man got catapulted like a lawn dart.
Now we talk about the cruiserweights. And I was going to mention this match right in here with the WCW thing on Chapter 5 here. We're going to move to Chapter 5 because it goes along with the WCW storyline. WCW changed wrestling forever with fast-paced cruiserweight wrestling. You had Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, and
Juventud Guerrero.
Yeah, Guerrero. I cannot pronounce that. Must-key watches cruiserweight matches. You had Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero, Halloween Havoc 1997. That was that cruiserweight title match that if Rey didn't win, he had to be unmasked.
Yep.
That was one of my favorites out of that.
Same here.
You had Chris Jericho versus Malenko, Slamboree 1998. Rey versus Juventud Guerrera, Super Brawl, and you also had Eddie versus Dean Malenko at Hog Wild. What was your favorites out of what matches I mentioned, and also the Cruiserweight Legends of WCW?
Oh, but before I mention all that, we are forgetting one key factor with the Cruiserweights. And this group may be underrated thanks to Eddie Guerrero, but the LWO started in WCW. Other than that, outside of the Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero match, I gotta say it was a match that I saw that had Juventud Guerrero versus La Parka at the time. That was another instant classic, and the Filthy Animals part with Rey Mysterio being associated with that, with Conan, he was even in that cruiserweight division. So it was a lot of great things that the cruiserweights did that paved the way for wrestling.
Now, going back to the cruiserweights, there was another cruiserweight too that it was like a Thunder Tiger. I can't.
Houston Thunder Liger.
Thunder Liger. Yes, that's the name.
I knew I'm going. As soon as you said that, I was like, he's talking about Houston Thunder Liger.
Yes, that was another WCW that I could not get off the top of my head, but thank you for mentioning that. Another WCW. Also, there was another one, Scorpio. I think I got that right. Scorpio.
Too Cold Scorpio.
Yep, and Vampiro. Vampiro, yeah, there's another one, Vampiro.
Yes. And did we forget another guy that was in that cruiserweight division? And probably nobody don't remember this name as much, but I'll give this one an honorable mention for being in that cruiserweight division, Glacier.
Yep, Glacier's another one. I mean, if you guys know any other WCW superstars, put them in the chat here. You know, we could talk about this topic, or even in the comment section. When we bring this podcast back, we may even cover, we may even see if Kevin Impact will come in to give you his wrestling favorites in WCW, because that man is knowledgeable on WCW stuff.
Oh, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there is going to be a moment podcast that I'm going to be doing probably tomorrow or Tuesday, where I will cover the women's revolution every era. Stay tuned for that. Because we can't forget about the women's moments.
I definitely agree with that. Now we get on to one of my favorites, and I think this goes to the Attitude Era. So DJ, you know where I'm going about ready to cover here.
Oh boy.
One of my favorites. So this is going to be a lot of history that I could give you myself, growing up as a kid watching. Austin versus Bret Hart, WrestleMania 13. That's when Austin and Bret Hart was pretty much like, I think it was Austin passed out during the sharpshooter because Bret Hart locked it in. Because like he was bleeding so much, like he passed out, and I think they gave it to Bret. Mankind versus Undertaker, King of the Ring, 1998. That was another classic. I think that's the same. If I'm doing recall, I think that's when Undertaker threw him off the cell.
Yep, but before that moment, I'll throw this one in there too for you, CJ.
If it's the next one I'm about to mention,
the infamous Boiler Room Brawl.
Nope, I wasn't going to mention that because they don't have it on there. But the next one I'm going to mention is a well-known Attitude Era moment that had WrestleMania tags right in the middle of it. We're going back to old school days of Attitude Era. WrestleMania 17, Rock versus Austin.
Oh, yeah. And we can't forget another good moment from WrestleMania 17, if I'm not mistaken.
TLC 2.
Yes. Hardy's, Dudley's, Edge, and Christian.
Yep. I think that match was actually the best thing that they could done with the segment, because back in the day, Vince, he didn't care what he done. I mean, Vince is one of the, I guess you could call him one of the strategic guys that is a promoter that, back in his days, when he done the Attitude Era, you had big names in the Attitude Era. You had Bret Hart, you had Undertaker, you had Rock, Austin, Triple H, Kane, Mick Foley, HBK. And out of all of those matches, I got to say personally, my favorite from the Attitude Era, you know where I'm going with this, DJ, and it's going all the way to WrestleMania 17, Rock versus Austin.
Mm-hmm. That Rock versus Austin match pretty much that set those two men at an upper level that made that era so legendary.
Not only that, but going back to that TLC match that we talked about with the Dudley Boys, there's not many tag teams that would do the stuff that the Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian have done, especially in the business that, in the business, especially the spots they had to call, especially I think Edge spearing, I think Jeff Hardy off because he was hanging trying to grab the belt, and you see Edge go to the top of the ladder, hits a spear, and both of them goes down on that mat.
Even before that whole incident, I think it was Jeff Hardy who speared Bubba Ray Dudley off of that same platform. I think it was Devon that was hanging, and then Jeff kind of did a spear. If you can recall that.
Yep. Oh, this next one's going to be a doozy. This next is definitely going to be a doozy because Chapter 7, we're going to cover ECW Hardcore Revolution.
Oh, wow.
The legends of this. Tommy Dreamer, Raven, Rob Van Dam, Sabu, Taz, and I think there's another legends that should be in with the Hardcore Revolution because, if it hadn't been for Shane Douglas, ECW wouldn't came, so he falls
Here's
in
two names I'm gonna throw out there to you that needs to be mentioned in this too. Axel Rotten and Balls Mahoney.
Yep, I definitely agree with that too.
And then, as far as the ladies go, I can't forget these three names: Beulah McGillicuddy, Dawn Marie, and Francine, the Queen of Extreme. And that's way before Lita took the name of Queen of Extreme in WWE.
Now we go to the other favorites here that I want to talk about. We're going to move to Chapter 8. And I think this chapter, DJ, is definitely going to get your rocks in order. Personally, my favorite with this ruthless aggression era, you had stars like John Cena, Batista, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Kurt Angle, and Eddie Guerrero. Matches that I think that should stood out was Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 21.
All right.
Batista versus Triple H, WrestleMania 21. And that infamous Eddie versus Brock Lesnar. And also John Cena versus JBL at WrestleMania 21. That set the ruthless aggression era on the map to build the next future stars of WWE.
And then those are good mentionable matches, but also I cannot forget this one in particular, and it falls under the category that when Ray and Eddie came over there at, I forgot the WrestleMania that this was at, but they had a 5-star classic at this WrestleMania.
I think it wasn't Kurt Angle and Eddie when he won the WWE title. Didn't he face Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania, or was that WrestleMania 20?
Yeah, Eddie and Kurt went at it at a WrestleMania. That's when I think the moment that Eddie won was when Kurt Angle went for the ankle lock. He took Eddie's shoe off and Eddie rolled him up for a pin.
I think it wasn't Eddie's shoe, it was Eddie's boot.
Yeah, Eddie's boot basically came on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. We're going to get back on topic here because there's
I mean, there's so much to cover in each of these eras. There's so many legendary moments, but I will cover most of the stuff we need to cover as far as the women's side, because there's so much for the ladies that need to be mentioned.
Now, getting back on topic here, we're going to the TNA Classic era of wrestling, and
Oh boy,
boy, this is going to be some good matches that you need to write down for this, because you got AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, Kurt Angle, and Sting.
Kazarian.
And here's my favorite match that they actually mentioned. It's the last one on the list, but thank God they mentioned this. The first match was AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe versus Christopher Daniels at Unbreakable 2005 pay-per-view in TNA. Then you had Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe at Genesis 2006. Then you had AJ Styles versus Kurt Angle, Hard Justice. And at Bound for Glory, you had two of the very best that I personally call, WCW and WWE stars going head-to-head. Kurt Angle versus Sting.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree with that match right there, because so much happened in that match. It's ridiculous.
Now, we get into the last chapter here in Chapter 10. Modern Wrestling. Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, Gunther for WWE. Then you got AEW, Kenny Omega, Jon Moxley, MJF, Bryan Danielson. Most watched modern matches, of course, Cody and Reigns at WrestleMania XL. WrestleMania 40. I think it's 40, maybe 30. I think it's 40.
Yeah, it was WrestleMania 40 because they had like back-to-back moments, so it was like 40 and like.
Then you had Omega versus Okada series, which
right.
I didn't watch the AEW, so I wouldn't know about that, but I will study on that and get back with you guys.
Yeah, that one was good, but let's just take you back to something that we missed here. Before that whole Omega and Okada, pretty much that all stemmed from New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Now we get on to the Gunther versus Sheamus Clash at the Castle, and then you also had Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins, Hell in a Cell, with that modern day wrestling. But now we get on the top 50 matches every wrestling fan must watch. This is WCW, WWE, ECW, TNA, AEW, New Japan, and final exam for the wrestling. So I'm going to do this also to see if you guys actually paying attention. For this episode, and DJ, you can answer it in the chat.
Yes.
This is going to be 50 questions every wrestling fan should know. And we're going to start with the easy round. In the easy round, first question, who defeated Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3?
See, if anybody knows their history, they should know that answer all too well. But I'm not going to reveal it.
Let's see if you guys know. Because I'm not going to tell the answers until the next podcast. So save that answer. For answer number 2, what was the main event of WrestleMania 3?
I know it, but I'm not going to say it.
Question number 4. And we're going to get on to the WCW round. Who defeated Hollywood Hulk Hogan for the WCW World Title on Nitro in 1998? Now we're going to go with So here's the thing that I'm going to give you for the ECW Hardcore Final Exam. So, first question, and this is a hard question, of course, if you don't know who I'm talking about. What championship did Shane Douglas famously throw down in 1994 to launch ECW as its own promotion? And I'm going to put this question here in the chat, and I don't want you guys to Google this question. If you guys are true wrestling fans, you will answer this without using Google. So we're going to paste this here. I'm going to put this question as the first question here. Let's see if you guys get this right. Which championship did Shane Douglas famously throw down in 1994 to help launch ECW as its own promotion? Because this is a question that each podcast that we do with Wrestling Favorites, we're going to have a scoreboard. So if you do 4 out of 10, you're Extreme Rookie. If you do 5 out of 10, you're an ECW fan. If you're 6 out of 10, Hardcore Contender. If you're 7 out of 10, ECW Original. If you're 8 out of 10, Hardcore Veteran. If you're 9 out of 10, Extreme Icon. If you're 10 out of 10, you're ECW Hall of Famer. So we're going to put this. And the first question that I give during this podcast before me and DJ ends this is, which championship did Shane Douglas famously throw down in 1994 to help launch ECW as its own promotion? You
Drop
guys
it in the comments below.
drop it in the comments below because that's the only time we have in 10 episodes. We're going to score you guys on if you're right or wrong. If you're wrong, we're going to give you the scoreboard on if
And the crazy thing about it is we will reveal who answered it right on the next episode.
Yep. Until then, guys, stay tuned for Wrestling Favorites. And let's see who's the real wrestling fan stars. We will see you guys on the next one.